Megwyn, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you so much for taking part in this interview today. I'm very happy to have you here. You are an intimacy coach and the founder of Haptic Body. So tell me about what Haptic Body is and what inspired you to get into the sexual wellness industry.
Well, so Haptic Body basically is a self-care sensual practice that works on regulating the nervous system, aligning the body, and also helping to connect us to the sensual reality of life through slow touch technology in particular, and also through tapping into the connections of breath and also the voice.
Oh, that's so interesting about the voice. Yeah, that's very interesting. So one of your principles at Haptic Body is that touch can expand neural connections to support brain function. Can you explain the process through which touch expands these connections?
Sure. So first, we have to understand that skin and the brain were actually formed of the same material. In embryological development, there's three main materials that form the body. And so the skin and the neural receptors within the brain are actually formed of ectoderm. And so sometimes we think of the brain as this separate organ, but actually the skin is one of the most powerful mediums to actually tuning in and connecting into the brain and also touching every other system within the body because it's the most outer layer. So within the skin, it's kind of like a computer. We have different touch receptors. So touch receptors that connect us to grading forms of touch, vibration. We have temperature receptors, so that temperature receptors that help us to tune to what's cold or what's hot. And so these different receptors within the body are also helping to connect to an area of the brain called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is basically also in the way we process emotion. So what you can actually do through touching the bodies, you can actually regulate emotions and you can actually unlock the capacity to experience the world through a wider lens. And so another way to describe it is like if you're under a lot of stress, if you have a lot of anxiety, you literally feel the world kind of narrowing in. Everything gets smaller. Your ability to perceive and connect also becomes narrowed. And so when we open up the connection to these neural receptors through the skin, a friend of mine always likes to say that my work is about grooming the nervous system. So it's about heightening that that perception of awareness so that you can experience just a wider reality, a much more, a reality which has more texture and color, which is more vivid. And ultimately it ties back into sexuality because, and I'm sure you know this, but like the more neural connections we have within the body, the more wiring, right, is fired, the more intense that orgasmic energy is, the fuller the experience. And so that's why it's also important to explore, different forms of touch and also different contexts through which we can explore sensory awareness.
Well, that's fascinating. It makes me think about the people who aren't touched very often.
Yeah, and it's, we've found that basically without the touch really plays an important role in health and longevity. So, people that aren't touched tend to also have, weaker immune system and also have difficulty oftentimes regulating the emotions. We are mammals, we're meant to co-regulate and connect through touch and also through expression. So a lot of my work really focuses on opening up the touch from the inside out. So like the voice, for instance, is a kind of somatic touch that we experience on the inside out. And it also reflects, an emotional tone. And it can also help to regulate others that we come in contact with.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. So what kind of touch techniques or tools are used for this process?
So there's quite a few different tools. Most of the tools that I use are very natural. There's a tool called the dry brush. I use a kind of dry brush. Prefer the palm brush because it does have a bit more of a stronger connection to the skin. And I'll use that to also make contact with the fascia that exists below the skin. And the fascia is kind of like the matrix of the structure within the body. It holds the muscles and the bones. So that's an example of one. Another is actually Himalayan salt crystal, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Because the body is bioelectric. So I'll use that on different points, different access points to kind of tap into that electrical matrix. And then there's also, may not make so much sense, but the sea sponge is also a really powerful tool to help unlock the connection of full body breath. So there's quite a few different tools though that I use. But the main kind of thing that really connects everything is something that I discovered about alignment. One of my mentors, her name is Yamina Zaik, and she developed a technique called body logic and Yamina body rolling. And she's really a genius of understanding the alignment. And what I learned from her was that, you know, everything is connected. And so as above, so below. And so she really taught us that, for instance, the body is built on these postural plates. And in particular, the face is a really key access into balancing the whole energy of the body. And so when I started to develop my work, it was really in learning how to access these connection points within the face that would help to create more space, more dynamic energy through the body. And then I started to learn that it was also tied to a neurological plexus called the vagus nerve, which is basically the neurological plexus that allows us to connect to our sensory reality. And it's also tied to our voice and to the expression of the face. And it's a key neurological plexus that allows us to basically be intimate as mammals. It allows us to downregulate our stress response. And there's a wonderful scientist named Stephen Porges who developed a theory called the polyvagal theory, which has, you know, really influenced my work, in which he discovered that the upper circuits of the vagus nerve, which connect to the face and to the voice, are kind of like the king and the queen of the entire nervous system. And so what I really learned was it's not just alignment, it's also our ability to emote and to express and connect in authentic ways that also help to balance the entire expression of the body. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know it's sometimes a little hard to translate, but
that's fascinating. So I guess, I mean, we know that we just express so much emotion in our faces anyway.
Yeah.
So would you recommend, I saw a picture on your website with one of those face brushes, and I've had one for years. I did find it a bit harsh though, but now I've started using it just to exfoliate. Yeah. So and also a dry body brush. So what are these the tools that we could be using every day just to kind of?
Yeah, so there's different ways that people have used those tools historically, and a lot of them have been sort of more tied to moving lymph within the body. In my work, I don't as much focus on that aspect of it. I focused more on sort of accessing the structure and the alignment. So for instance, with the dry brush, we don't really use it. I don't really use it a lot, you know, as a sort of brushing through the skin, but more anchoring different points. So for instance, the cheeks, like, well, let's start with this first, that the bones of the skull are separate. There's different bones that form the skull. And then there are, of course, muscles that also connect to these bones. And so when you access different touch points throughout the face, for instance, like the cheekbones mirror the connections of the ribs. So as we age, for instance, there's a general collapsing kind of down and in. We start literally kind of collapsing in on the body. So for instance, you'll see old people, they shuffle their legs, kind of shuffling. With the face, the same kind of thing. Everything here starts to collapse. So you can use those tools to start to open things up. In particular, as you start to learn how to connect the breath throughout the entire body. So for, the breath when we're babies expands all the way up into the top of our head and all the way down to the lower part of our body, even into the feet. And as we age, we start to lose access to that. And so my work really helps for people to actually see, becomes a feedback tool to actually learn how you can breathe literally into the skull to start to open up the alignment of the body. And as you do that, you can also shift your state. You start to feel more bliss, more safety, just, a more holistic connection to the body.
So is that kind of like a facial reflexology in some ways?
Yeah, in some ways it is. And I'm sure that there are absolutely, access points into, the ancient system of acupuncture and that sort of thing. I haven't come into an awareness of my work through that angle, but I know that when I started doing this work, it really just, other things started to improve my skin, and just a general feeling of health throughout my body. And then as we tie it back to sexuality, starting to really experience how important the O face is.
Oh yeah, do you know, speaking of that, actually earlier today I was I'm really into natural cosmetics, and I did a green clay face mask, and I mixed it with some jojoba oil and some water, and I put it all on all my face and neck. And as I was waiting, I just thought, I'm gonna have an orgasm now. And then I found that my orgasm was almost limited because I couldn't move my face. I was going to ask you about that. Do you think that's true? Because I felt like I couldn't, obviously it was just it was all dry by then, so I couldn't really express myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because again, the face is like the king and the queen for regulating the nervous system. And then when we talk about those postural plates, it's important when you're thinking about orgasm, because orgasm is all about unlocking energy, right? Bioelectric energy. And most people know it in terms of, the Kegel muscles, right? The pelvic floor muscles are responding, but there's many different diaphragms that basically contract and release when we're experiencing orgasm. And the top is actually the palate. Wow. And in order to unlock, right, those higher notes, right, of orgasm and that really intense sort of upper flow of orgasm, we have to be able to move and connect to the sensuality and the suppleness, and those subtle connections that all tie back into the nervous system and allow us to basically kind of marry, the body. We're in terms of intimacy, we're of course connecting with a partner, but we're also of course connecting with ourselves, and the face is really, really a key aspect to that. I like to do face mask after orgasm.
Oh yeah, maybe it's what next time, but I just thought our time was limited, so I thought I would make the most
I love that
time. And there's also, I learned something new as well. And another restriction can be when you want to be quiet because you live with people.
Yeah,
that's another kind of thing that can kind of impact the orgasm. I guess we can bite the pillow, but it's not the same as just going it's a really big expression.
Yeah, I mean, there's and everybody of course expresses differently, and it's important to note too that, like, obviously there's a lot of women that fake orgasms, so we're definitely not talking about just making sound for the sake of making sound, but it's really in what are called prosodic sounds. So those are specifically the sounds that connect back into the somatic part of the body. So they're the vibrations that communicate the emotions. So, for instance, the way you would connect with a baby, you make different kinds of sounds, and we've actually found that those sounds are actually helping to lay down the neural connections within the brain to support the immune system. So these sounds are vibratory sounds that are experienced more through our viscera they're more primal. And so they can be also very quiet, you know, just like even just keeping the mouth closed, but vibrating the lips. You know, we have the upper lips and the lower lips, you know, just as an exploration, you know, using you know, sex toy or masturbating. And as you're exploring, make vibrations and try to relax the face as you do so, and you'll start to feel that the energy actually can build through that connection.
In my experience, I don't know if it's just me, but I find that if I'm with a partner or having, let's say, penetration, then I'm making noise throughout. I'm with my vocal cords, but when I'm masturbating, it's just at the orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's because with a partner, it's a kind of, it's not just the orgasm, it's, you know, even before, a long time before. Is that normal?
I mean, you know, again, we all express and experience things so differently. And, you know, they've actually found that, for instance, even the thoughts that we think are actually connecting to the language centers within the brain. So even if you're not making sound, there's still a dynamic of vibration, of experience. And, you know, certainly there's no right or wrong way to explore. But the one through line is that, you know, we'll always have the breath. And the breath is really the support for sound. So whether you're, you know, communicating and connecting with those outward vibratory sounds, the breath intrinsically has a vibration. There's a sound, there's an energy that, you know what I mean, exists even within the silence of the breath.
Interesting. So what is erotic plasticity? I've heard of neuroplasticity, is that the right word? But what is erotic plasticity?
So erotic plasticity really just has to do with being open to different things, being open to variety. And, you know, we tend to sort of have a certain capacity for being open to different things. So for some people, they really like sex to be always the same. There's actually almost an erotic excitement when things are the same. And that's kind of a particular type of person. But what they've actually found is that, for instance, women tend to have a larger range of erotic plasticity. And erotic plasticity is also something that really can develop over time. And so it really just has to do with, you know, being open to adding flavor, color, exploration, texture to the erotic experience. But it's more so a helpful term for us to understand ourselves as we evolve as erotic beings. So for instance, if you find that you're like, you know, in your 40s and now you're wanting, you know, a threesome with your partner, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm attracted to women. And maybe you've never been attracted to women. This is just an example of erotic plasticity, of just, you know, that your erotic desires can change and evolve over time. And in general, it's, I think, something that even if you don't necessarily have a wide range of erotic plasticity, you know, you can develop it and attune to it just with being more mindful of what you do like, you know, kind of heightening whatever it is that you do love exploring.
I find a lot of people actually write to me and they found the one tried and tested way to reach orgasm. Even with men who watch lots of porn, they have to maybe end with just like masturbation rather than penetration. I think some people have always had this, you know, this idea of I can only have an orgasm this way, and it can be very limiting. And I had the same thing happen to me years ago with the rabbit vibrator. I thought I need dual stimulation, and I had some other vibrators like a lay-on, a bullet vibrator, and I just didn't do anything for me. And then one day, the rabbit vibrator broke, which was actually a blessing in disguise, because I was kind of forced in the nicest possible way to learn other ways to have orgasms, which was really great. And I realized that the thing that stayed the same were the erotic triggers in my mind. It was nothing to do with the toy. So now 700 toys later, I found that, you know, most of them, 99%, you know, success rate, they've mostly, but that's because I've been able to change, you know, the external stimulus all the time, but the internal is quite similar.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. And it's just, even just having that willingness and openness, to kind of lean in and become curious about some new form of stimulation. I mean, you've made that your work,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
incredibly, that's incredibly enriching. And I think that is huge, especially as we, move through the aging process. Like, we tend to narrow our opportunities for sexual pleasure if we just think about ourselves as though when we age, we're going to lose, that sexual impulse or that sexual connection. That if we actually start to think, no, instead of we're losing it, it's actually evolving, it's changing, it's becoming dynamic, perhaps in a different kind of way. And like, for instance, for women that are going through menopause, perhaps penetration is not the end all be all, could be painful even for some, but exploring, accessing sexuality through, different parts of the body, or even through creative outlets, can be really, really important. So yeah, in a way, that's, how we could think about erotic plasticity kind of supporting us throughout our lifetime.
Yeah, I think for me, when I started having sex, like maybe like lots of people, it was all defined by penetration, and you could have like penetrative sex maybe 5 times a night, and it was like boom, boom, boom. Whereas now, even with the men change as well as we age, they maybe can't do 5 times a night, So it's always different, and there tends to be more emphasis on foreplay and sensuality, which is just fantastic. The best part, I think, sometimes, because I mean, we're not touching all of the body a lot of the times in sex. I think it's so important to touch all of the body, not just the the breasts and the genitals and the ass. You miss out on so much, so many areas. When I had a tantric massage a few years ago, I did a collaboration with a tantric massage center, and I didn't realize that my ankles could be erogenous, because they were like tickling around the ankles and behind the knees. It was like, oh my God, it was really amazing.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. The whole body is erotic. I mean, I honestly once had one of the most amazing orgasms of my life through my ear. I tell that to people, and they're always like, really? And I'm, yep. It's, there's just so many areas within the body that are so erotic, but we have to be able to kind of slow down sometimes in order to be able to feel and to explore that. And so much of eroticism is just about attention. When you have a lover, right, that's like really attentive and attuned to every little aspect of touch, that in and of itself can be incredibly erotic. And it's a great thing. It doesn't come down to a particular technique or a specific erogenous zone. So much of it is just in the ability to slow down and to kind of open your mind to what's possible.
Yeah, even the nape of the neck and the ear, I definitely agree with you there. And whispering.
Yeah.
Definitely. You're also the director of education for Satisfier, established in 2016. Satisfier is the largest global sexual wellness brand. So tell us about this role.
Yeah, so as you said, Satisfier is it's an award-winning sexual wellness brand. And basically, I came on board as someone that can kind of bridge that sexual, sensual, embodied education to understanding our large, vast range of products. Because, basically, especially in the West, I don't know exactly what it's like everywhere, but our sex education is pretty abysmal. And so I basically just help to fill in the gaps of where people don't necessarily understand their bodies. And particularly women, we're not taught at all about our clitoris and how it connects into the body, and how integral it is to our sexual experience. So I basically help to offer an awareness on how to use the products in particular, not just through where to put it, where to touch, but also how to connect from the inside out to help unlock that erotic experience. And it really first started with our most famous product that we have is called the Satisfier Pro 2, which is, of course, an air pulse stimulator. And it basically connects to the body through indirect pressure waves, and it stimulates the clitoral glands. And when I first tried this, product out, it was just mind blowing. I mean, I would say my first tantric orgasm with a sexual wellness product of my life. And, my first orgasm with the product was like screaming yes, and just, wanted to share it with everyone. And so that's really when I approached the company. I had already been doing a lot of work within the sexual wellness world in relationship to lifestyle practices. And so, we made a connection with that. And now I basically work full time, within the company, and helping people to understand the full range of products, and also just helping to bust sexual myths, try to release some of the sexual stigmas and shame. Becomes really important. And you know this, that, you're a voice for this, to be able to share with people that there's nothing to be ashamed of, and to be able to talk openly and honestly about sexuality without that feeling of stigma and shame. It gives people permission to really open up and, want to learn more.
Definitely, because I find that sometimes when people buy a sex toy, it's like signing up for the gym. You can get your gym membership, but you've got to do the work, So I think part of that, it's like bridging that gap between just buying something and actually being able to enjoy it, because not everyone can connect the dots so easily. It does take a bit of education. I do, for me, after my rabbit vibrator broke, I realized it really was about a mind-body connection, which is not so evident for many women, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, even the way we talk about, sexuality, we talk about the G spot, and we think about it as like this sort of button or this point or the clit, but it really, all of that sexual energy is connected to the entire body. And so as we learn how to really relax into being fully embodied sensual beings, we can get any kind of stimulation, like you were saying, through the ankles or through the ear. And there are about 10% of women, for instance, who are orgasmic just by thinking alone. So we have this incredible capacity to unlock not just orgasm, but just, the capacity to feel and to really embrace and love ourselves through sensual touch. And it does require some learning. I wouldn't say that there's aspects to it, of course, that are intuitive, but just like learning anything, you can get better with it. You can learn how to, access more of that energy through different kinds of tools, different forms of touch, exploring maybe a particular erotic desire or context, or perhaps it's creating the ambiance. Learning about our sensual selves is something that will continue to evolve throughout our lifetimes. And why not get as many tools as you can to really access, that energy?
Yeah, I always feel like, even though I kind of know a lot, I always love to surprise myself and find new things, I just find it fascinating. And I like to realize that I don't know everything. I find that really, really sexy. I actually have one of these Pro 2s here. And actually, speaking of erotic plasticity, and one of my friends who watches, I went to a sex shop recently with a group of friends who they all went to buy the Satisfier Pro 2. And one of the girls in the group was saying that she watches this real life couple who have porn, who do porn together on some webcam or something. And the girl at the end, she always has to get this out to finish off.
Wow.
Which is okay watching it 10 times, but like, it's like, okay, the Pro 2 is coming out now. They do the same thing all the time. But that's quite interesting how it's a great product. That was going to be my next question, actually. So this is actually the world's best-selling sex toy. And it's actually grown organically and orgasmically, hasn't it? I mean, so why do you think it's been so successful?
Well, I have one here myself too.
Oh, great. This is a great picture.
I know, right? So, I mean, first of all, I think part of it is that it doesn't look like a typical sex toy. It's not phallic, right? It's not like
Yeah.
if you saw it lying on a countertop, you don't immediately jump to, oh, that must be a sex toy. But it also just, in terms of the functionality, what it does with those indirect pressure waves is, first of all, it creates a seal, with a little hole here that connects around your clitoral glands. And I have a little clitoral model here because I thought maybe we would show
Oh,
that, right?
great.
So this is the clitoral gland. So that's just the external portion. This is densely packed with sensory receptors, nerve endings, so about 8,000 to potentially 15,000 nerve endings, all connecting here. And so they're sensitive to pressure and to touch. And so what the Satisfier Pro 2 does is it works with non-touch air pulse technology. And so it stimulates the clitoral glands indirectly through blowing and then kind of a sucking action, which basically helps to engorge the rest of the clitoris. And the clitoris flanks the vaginal canal. And so all of this area opens up. This is all erectile tissue. And underneath here, we've also got the perineal sponge. Here we've got the labia minora. All of this is interconnected, interwoven. And so for a lot of women, penetration doesn't always feel good because this erectile tissue has not yet been engorged. And so the Satisfier Pro 2 helps to activate all of that erectile tissue and also helps us to just be more sensitive to, to our breath and to also the inner dynamics of that orgasmic experience. So I love when I share this tool with people for the first time, I tell them, try connecting with it at a slow speed, like at a 2 or a 3, and take slow, deep breaths, especially exhale the air all the way out. Just for the first couple breaths. Breath is going to naturally change as the energy builds. But that really helps to activate that connection, to start to unlock that building of arousal within the body. And so even without that type of tip or that awareness, women tend to use this and find that they're able to kind of access that orgasmic energy with or without, a fantasy. Because I know for myself, when I masturbate with my hands, I really need to have some kind of context in my mind. When I'm using this, I just tap into the breath,
Wow.
connect with more of the embodied experience, and I can unlock that energy and kind of use that as, as a kind of vital energy to unlock just feeling good, in general. But I think with this product, the reason why it's just become so popular is just that once women try this, they want to share it with others. It's just when we lose access to that sexual energy, we lose, it's like the lights kind of go off. And so this is a product that really turns that pilot light of sexual energy on. And you can use it, in the middle of the day. Like you can use it as a lifestyle tool, as we were talking about the skin.
Yeah,
Use it as part
absolutely.
of your skincare regime.
That's fascinating, but it really has been successful due to word of mouth, hasn't it? It hasn't really been a global campaign. It's just been people sharing it with their friends, which is incredible, which just shows that our society has evolved about sexuality, not just keeping it. It's been too good to keep a secret.
Yeah, and I think for sure it's just been, I think as women, when we find something really great and really life-changing, we do want to share it, with others. And I think in particular, this is a revolution because it works with the technology of the body in a very unique way. It's just a kind of higher level sort of approach to unlock what we naturally have, but is difficult to always access just with touch alone.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
sometimes with touch, the body, if if we're not primed or ready for that touch, the body can shut down or lock in. And so there's just something about air pulse technology that just feels, easier to connect with, and, unlocks that technology within the body.
Yeah, it's interesting because it doesn't look like a sex toy, and there are some products for the face, like those face brushes, the electric ones, that are very similar. And my cleaning lady, actually, when she saw all the toys here, she told me that she was cleaning another house and she saw one of these on the nightstand, and she actually cleaned it. And then she was telling her friends about it. They're all laughing. That's the Satisfier. Do you know what it does? And she's like, oh my God, I cleaned it. It's really incredible. So tell us about Ramotica from Satisfier.
Ramotica is basically a partnership that we have with a company called Berlin Able, which is one of the largest platforms for audio erotica. And what they do is they actually create audio erotica based on people's, own stories. And so we also have a technology called Satisfier Connect. With many of our new products, they're Bluetooth enabled, and you can bridge to our app, which expands the features within the product. You can use it as a remote control. You can create your own unique programs. But within the Satisfier Connect app, we also have an audio function. So basically what it will do is it will translate the sounds to unique vibration programs. And so the Ramotica project was basically something that we created to help inspire that creative energy. So people all across the world came up with their own unique erotic stories based on the inspiration of also the Satisfier products. So you can, there's a SoundCloud a playlist, and you can go to the Ramotica playlist and basically experience some of these unique stories. So you can, tie in some of that erotic inspiration, and imagine yourself as a different character, and really expand that erotic plasticity.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Exactly, while you're using a Satisfier. So.
Definitely. Here in Spain, Satisfier is so popular, and the Pro 2 is just called the Satisfier. That could be similar in different countries, but I think people forget that there are actually 200 products. Is that correct? And some of them are
more than 200 products.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the app technology has really grown with the pandemic.
Yeah, that's been wild. Like, we came up with the app, before the pandemic, but it really was launched just right before. And so we have this one function within the app that also allows you to connect with your partner remotely. Mm-hmm. And that became a huge topic of interest, obviously, with the pandemic, partners that were separated with distance and using their products with their partner and connecting through a live stream technology that we have embedded within the app. And so you can control your partner. I mean, you can control the product, while you're looking at your partner, while you're hearing them, while you're seeing them. And it was really cool because it really also opened up a kind of new awareness, which is prioritizing your own self-pleasure, mm-hmm. right? As you're connecting with another person, and keying into those cues, that facial expression.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever tried doing it remotely? I'm so curious if you.
Oh yeah, I have it, and also I was sent a spare Panty vibe, that's another thing that's very popular now. These wearable toys. And I think the distance control is really changing how we use sex toys, because in the past it might be just in the case of vibration, it's going for the longest or the most intense continuous vibration, and the other 8 that are patterned, you just kind of forget about them, However, when you're using it with a partner, the patterned ones seem to be more fun. And then pressing pause, and recently I was sent a spare Panty vibe, and I always give like my spare toys away to friends and ask them for their feedback. And it was one of my friends' birthdays recently, and I gave her the Satisfier Little Secret, which is remote controlled. And I told her, when you go out with your boyfriend, give him the remote control while you're having your dinner. So they did that, and she didn't tell him that she was wearing it. She just like she went to the toilet, make sure everything was connected, and then gave him the remote control.
Yeah.
Which is really fun. But he obviously could just see from her face what was happening. So it's going
Oh
back
my
to
God.
the face, you know, being an indicator of what's going on. And also every time the waiter came, he was like pressing. And I think that's such an interesting way to explore intimacy and humor with a partner.
Yeah.
It's not just about orgasm, because you're not really going to have an orgasm in
Right.
that context. Or that kind of delicious suffering, you know, in public.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And, you know, you can even get creative with it. Like, sometimes I tell women, like, you know, in the middle of the day, if you need like a pick me up, connect to the music vibes feature with your panty vibe and just use it while you're dancing, and, you know, use that sensory vibration to help connect you more to that erotic energy. And, you know, it's a great way to release stress, and to, like you said, with partners, to just, you know, really amp up that desire factor and that play factor. And I've always wanted to try it. I haven't done this yet, but like I thought it'd be really fun to explore with karaoke.
Oh,
Imagine
wow.
if you were to do it while you sang, to actually experience, because we also have an ambient sound feature.
Oh, I was going to say that. Yeah, ambient sound. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a fun one. I've not really used that much either. And I've got some I had some not similar to roadworks going on here, and I thought that'd be kind of a good way to, you know, because they're so annoying, you know, when you get these drilling sounds and construction noises. They're kind of a good way to make them into something more orgasmic. You know, you could just connect it to the ambient sound. And one of my followers actually, who's a tickling fetishist, told me that that would be a really good way to interact. You know, every time you're laughing from tickling,
Oh my
that could
God.
provoke, because there's so much you can do. And also when, you know, when concerts start again, you know, the deep bass or that really loud music and stuff, that could be a really good way to enjoy a concert.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I haven't been to a concert yet, but I'm definitely going to bring mine.
Definitely, especially if you're going with someone that you're intimate with as well, it could be even more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the panty vibe too, because of just how it stimulates, you know, 2 points of contact. It kind of hits that opening of the vagina and also the clitoris. And so there's something too about that, hitting both of those points. It's very grounding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
In my opinion, there's not enough focus on like the entrance of the vagina. It's all like G-spot and internal, but I think you don't need to go in so far sometimes, and it kind of anchors it somehow, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us about what's a blended orgasm, and how does it differ from a standard orgasm?
Well, so, you know, blended orgasm is kind of a buzz term to just talk about dual stimulation or multiple forms of stimulation. And so it kind of ties back to that concept of activating multiple neural pathways. And so sometimes when we activate multiple neural pathways, and the most common, you know, blended orgasm would be like the G spot and the clitoris, right? Or, you know, the A spot and the clitoris, you know. And so sometimes when we have multiple forms of stimulation, it really requires us to connect that much more deeply to integrating those connections. And so that's where the vagus nerve, I think, really comes into play. Being able to tap into that connection of breath, and also to be able to expand connections within, for instance, the pelvic bowl area. So if we have a lot of tightness and constriction, or if we're in a position which is limiting, sometimes it'll be difficult to really connect to multiple forms of stimulation. But when we do have a blended orgasm, we have access to multiple neural pathways, there's this potential for more deeply visceral kind of orgasm, or, you know, full-bodied orgasm, if you will. And it's really great for helping someone to let go, to really allow themselves to fully, you know, embrace just opening up and letting go, and not trying to control so much the experience. And And so, you know, it definitely ties back to also the O phase, you know, to be able to really tap into that capacity to really let go and to give yourself permission to be primal, to really access that energy. You can tap into many different forms of stimulation and be able to access that orgasmic energy. And, you know, we think about like shame or inhibition, right? It really manifests in our face and, you know, in how we're breathing. So blended orgasm, I think, also serves many different functions. It's a really wonderful way to just overcome those blocks and those insecurities, those places where we might feel a lot of shame. And, you know, and of course, there's many sex toys that definitely focus on that, like the rabbit.
Oh, yeah, of course. So do you
Yeah.
think dual stimulation is actually more beneficial?
I think that, you know, I think it can be, because in general, if we access multiple pathways of connection, it can give us, you know, deeper sensations, and again, help us to really let go and to open up. But I think, again, you know, I really always come back to everybody has a preference. So for instance, if clitoral stimulation really works for you and that feels good, then explore that. But if you want to start introducing dual stimulation, you can start with it in a very gentle way. So for instance, Kegel balls are really great as a way to start to tap into the blended orgasm, because it's a sort of light blended orgasm. You can use the Kegel ball internally to access that clitoral urethral complex, that basically that area where the clitoris is flanking the vaginal canal. So that becomes a kind of feedback tool. And if you really love clitoral stimulation, just keeping the Kegel ball inside will help you to start to unlock more of those neural pathways and to become just more deeply connected to, you know, your orgasm. So that was something that I stumbled upon, and with the Satisfier, actually, it was like, oh wow, if I use a Kegel ball, it becomes a really great way to also be kind of hands-free. I don't have to hold anything, you know, inside to stimulate, and I can just focus more on my breathing and more on just unlocking that, you know, the pleasure without having to hold something inside. But, you know, there's so many different ways. You can also explore blended orgasm anally, you know, through anal stimulation and clitoral stimulation. I mean, that can feel amazing. You've got the pudendal nerve is a really important nerve for pleasure. And there's a lot of connections into that anal area and the perineal sponge. So, you know, our nipples also could be considered, you know, blended orgasm. So it's hard. I don't like to necessarily say when one thing is better or worse than another, but I think that if you've never tried it, give it a shot, explore it, experiment, and you can start off very gently, you know, especially for some women, penetration might not be so pleasurable. And, you know, if that's the case, then, you know, don't explore it, but, you know, it may be something that you might want to give a try.
Yeah, I think I'm the opposite of most women, actually, because when I started having sex, I was having orgasm from penetration all the time, like very easily. It was an almost cry. It seemed like a more emotional experience, penetration for me. And so I always just assumed, because of the magazines I was reading, that women are vaginal or clitoral. And I was like, oh, I'm vaginal then, you know, and that was like the minority or something. So I kind of dismissed my clitoris for a long time. Then I got my rabbit. I was having a bit of dual stimulation, but then when it broke, I just learned how to use external stimulation. I found that really mind blowing. So I was capable of something I didn't know I could do, you know.
Wow.
And I only had my first orgasm with cunnilingus maybe 7 years ago, because I'd learned that, you know, how to just enjoy external stimulation. And yeah, so it was really interesting how, you know, you can think you're one way and then you can learn new methods. Erotic plasticity, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like with the brain, you know. think it was Dan Siegel, it says nerves that fire together, wire together. So
Oh,
in many ways, you know, what we're practicing sexually tends to get sort of wired in and becomes something that, you know, becomes a pattern. So it's good to change it up, try different things. And you know, the clitoris is also, you don't have to stimulate it to activate it. Even when we breathe, you know, when we exhale and when we breathe diaphragmatically, for instance, and we do a Kegel, you're
mm,
actually grabbing hold of your clitoris because there's muscles that wrap around the clitoris every time as you learn how to do the Kegels. So we can touch our clitoris without, you know, using our hands or any other type of stimulation. Yeah.
definitely. So what about what's sexual fitness?
Oh,
Sexual fitness.
it's like a perfect segue, kind of. So sexual
Obviously,
fit.
with the giggles, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, sexual fitness is just really looking at strengthening and stretching the muscles that support sexual receptivity. So, obviously, and particularly, Kegel strengthening, you know, is an essential for supporting your genitals, supporting your ability to sexual response system, especially as we age. You know, these muscles tend to atrophy. And this is important for men and for women. And so it's just incorporating those types of exercises into your fitness routine. But there are also practices like yoga or other forms of physical training that are more proprioceptive in nature. Those will also help to strengthen those muscles in a more indirect kind of way. And you can also incorporate Kegels into your workout, whether you're working with, you know, weights, I mean, kettlebells are really big, you know, right now. Really understanding how to, let's say, if you're swinging the ball, how to access that Kegel at the end of the movement can really, you're basically helping to strengthen not just, let's say, your arms, if you think about it in kind of a more limited sort of way. When you're working with proprioceptive types of training or balance forms of training, you're always training that sexual center as well. And so learning to be more conscious of it can really help you to not only be better in bed, to be able to get more from your experience sexually, but also just to feel more confident and, you know, more sensually, and particularly more sensually receptive to, you know, whatever position you might find yourself in. And obviously it also informs how we hold ourselves as
I
well.
love hyperpressives. I've been to a few classes of that. You know, hyperpressives when you're doing stomach, when you're sucking your stomach in a lot, and then you're combining it with breathing. It's like I can't remember really describe it, but it was like very. So when people do those, I don't know what it's called in English, when their stomach kind of goes like concave.
Right.
And it's a
Yeah.
very advanced breathing.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of dates
Using the
back to
pelvic floor as
yoga.
well.
Yeah. Like a lot of yogic traditions would do a lot of
Yeah.
breathing techniques, which really incorporate those deeper core muscles. And one of my first forms of fitness that I ended up studying was yoga and Pilates. And obviously Pilates is, you know, very incorporates a lot of those Kegel muscles. And but the problem sometimes too is that these muscles can also be difficult to feel and to know when you're actually utilizing them. So it's cool how fitness has actually evolved, I think, over the last 20 years. If you think about yoga didn't even really originate in the West until it was like the late 60s, you know, and now there's a yoga studio on every corner. And now people are much more aware of the muscles within their body, of how things connect. We've become much more sophisticated in how we condition and support our body. And so weaving in sexual fitness inside of whatever kind of modality you're exploring can be really, really beneficial. Not just for the strength of your body, but also, you know, it's really helpful to know how to contract those Kegel muscles while you're having sex, how to use those muscles to help build the energy within the body.
And even if you're single, especially if you're single, you can't just let it go rusty.
Yeah.
Keep everything oiled up and working.
Yeah. If we don't use it, we lose it. And
definitely. So a couple of quick questions. What's the book that changed your life?
Well, so, you know, I love books, but the book that came to mind was Watsu, Freeing the Body in Water, by Harold Dahl. And this is actually, it's a book that really explores this technique of body massage that's in the water called Watsu. And Watsu, for those that have never tried it or explored it. Have you tried Watsu before?
No, but I love it. I'm always trying different spa treatments every month. So I'll have to look it up.
You would love it. You would love it. So basically what happens is the practitioner holds you in water and supports your body. And the water basically creates a buoyancy of support so that you can explore stretching and mobilizing the body and freeing up those restrictions. And a lot of those restrictions they're coming also from our emotions, right? They're sort of somatic. So inside of a Watsu, you really start to confront some of those emotional blocks through the somatosensory experience of being moved in water, which also there's a kind of intrinsic memory there too, because when we think about being in the womb, we were basically floating. That was probably one of the freest times in our life where everything was sort of perfect and we were held and we were safe. And so I discovered this technique not maybe 15 years ago, and it was by far the most life-changing body work that I'd ever experienced. And I knew I wanted to learn it. And this kind of body work really ended up informing also the haptic work, that I do as well. And I just have a fascination with water as well, just in general. Like, I feel like my happy place is in the bath. There's something about the water where I kind of can tap into my intuition and to my feminine, intuition in particular. So
I'll have to look at that and see if there's anything like that here in Barcelona. But here there is a company called Floatarium that have these flotation tanks. Have you tried that? When you're floating on
no, I haven't, but I'm sure that it's probably similar. But from what I understand, you're in the flotation tank. Is it dark inside?
Yeah, and they have some very nice music, maybe like very meditation music. I think it could, and it's loads of salt, so you're floating even if you can't swim. Everyone's floating, but I think it might feel a bit claustrophobic.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
interesting.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people that have tried that. They love it. Watsu is a bit different in that it's really about kind of mobilizing, and there's an intimacy to it as well. But that book, though, is just such a great book. Like, even if you're never going to explore Watsu as a modality, the originator, the creator of Watsu is this wonderful man named Harold Dahl, who has a very Zen type of approach. He really sees things through this very Zen kind of lens. And I remember reading in the book, he talked in particular about how Watsu can be such a powerful tool, especially for men, because men don't always get the opportunity to learn how to just be with that sexual impulse and not need to act on it or not need to suppress it. And so I think in a lot of ways, culturally, there's not a lot of ways for men to really practice being able to be with those sensual feelings that might arise, but not need to act on them and also not need to repress them. It's just about being free in the water. And what we know about babies is that even in utero, babies masturbate.
Wow.
So, we're sexual beings from the time we're, in utero till we die. So it's something that we don't always think about.
I'm going to check it out. And around the corner from here, there's a thing called aqua bike, which is like spinning in the water.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. Have you tried that?
No, but
it's like be fun.
Yeah, because I was doing spinning because I just joined a gym recently, about 6 months ago, to get the pandemic layer off. I was doing spinning for a while, but it's just so boring. I'm just more into weights now. I much prefer weights.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that changes too over time. You
Mhm.
know, you want to use what you want, what you want to use in order to strengthen and support your body. But I think especially as we age, we need that weight bearing strength. Yeah.
Definitely. So what's the phrase or affirmation or quote that you live by?
Well, as we spoke about before, I don't necessarily live by this quote, but this was a quote that I thought was really beautiful and that I could say, yeah, that is something I probably do live by. And it's actually a quote by my favorite poet named Jalaluddin Rumi, who is a 16th century Sufi mystic poet. And the quote is, "In order to understand the dance, one must be still. And in order to truly understand stillness, one must dance." And so I think that idea of being able to be connected and be able to move with life, but also be able to also tune in to the stillness, to the emptiness, to the unknown, is something that has really informed my experience. And also sometimes when there's a lot of chaos, let's say, in our minds, where there's a lot of emotional upheaval, returning back to that stillness, being able to tap into the unknown, oftentimes that's when, you know, there's new insights, there's new awarenesses that can emerge. And also being able to be sensually embodied is about embracing the dance of life. You know, I think has been such an important, or just thinking about life as a dance has been something that has really informed my experience of everything. Yeah.
Interesting. So where can people find you?
Well, on Twitter, my Twitter handle is at Megwyn, which is spelled Megwyn. And then I can also be found on Instagram at Haptic Body. And then, of course, through Satisfier as well. So Megwyn.white at satisfier.com.
And the Satisfier handles? Instagram.
The Satisfier handle is at satisfier.com on
Okay.
Instagram. Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have lots of people wanting to get the Pro 2 after this. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure joining you.